Talk shoes. Recorded live.
Hello and welcome to Castle of Horror, the show dedicated to horror movies and awesomeness. This week we have what we're calling an Exorcist bonus episode of Robert Wise's 1977 horror movie, Audrey Rose. Bear in mind, if you haven't seen today's movie, we're talking about it from the perspective of horror fans who have, so warning, spoilers ahead. From Denver, Colorado, I'm your host, Jason Henderson, creator of the graphic novel Sword of Dracula, which you can get on Comixology, and you should do because it is Halloween time. With me from Austin is Mr. Tony Salvaggio, lead singer of the band Deserts of Mars and co-creator of the comics Psychom from Tokyopop and Clockworks from Humanoid. Say hello, Tony.
Howdy.
Howdy. And also joining us from Denver, which is where I am, as always, color commentary from attorney Julia Guzman. Say hello.
Hello, Leolie.
And we do not have Drew tonight. Drew is traveling the world with the lovely Jamie's band, and so it is a three-hander, which is an unusual thing for us. Okay, Audrey Rose. I've got it actually playing on a screen in my studio as I watch. According to Wikipedia, Audrey Rose is a 1977 psychological horror and drama film. I do not know what that means. Directed by Robert Wise and starring Marcia Mason, Anthony Hopkins, and Susan Swift. It was based on the novel of the same name by Frank Falitta. The plot deals with a young girl who is believed by a man to be a reincarnation of his dead daughter. And this is 1977. This movie came out just a few years after the original Exorcist, 4 years or less. And, you know, I've picked this movie for us to show, you may be wondering, because to me it is kind of an alternate look at where the Exorcist series may have gone. And I think it's a really wonderful companion to the Exorcist series. So let's get started. Tony, I hate to put you on the spot, but I think I'm going to give you the first impression, and then Julia, and then I'll go. So, Tony, first impressions, Audrey Rose.
While I was watching it, I kind of thought of it as, this actually would have been a good Exorcist 2. Like the things we talked about, hey, I wish Exorcist 2 had done more of X, Y, or Z, and we, spun off a million, different things that could have been a better movie, or at least a few that, had they just concentrated on this. And, I kind of think the more I watched it, the more I was like, this could have been what at least the psychodrama version of Exorcist 2 that they started, this would have made a good version of that in a lot of ways. I mean, it's different enough that you can't say this is Exorcist 2.
You almost imagine that in Portugal they may have released it as Exorcist 2 just for the heck of it.
It could have been, it could have been that because it kind of made sense that way. The way that they have a, possession of sorts, then how she goes in and out of doctors' offices and all of that stuff that they kind of wanted to do. And so I don't know if it's a particularly memorable movie as far as it's not one that stuck with me immediately after watching. I was like, whoa, it brought up all this stuff. But it's a really good thriller. It's definitely kind of a time. There were a lot of the questions it asks and the things that it talks about are kind of definitely. There was a lot of that in the time period when this movie came out.
Yeah.
But I like the movie, and I think it's kind of a better Exorcist 2.
Well, if you're going to compare it with Exorcist 2 itself, it's vastly better. But yeah,
right.
Wow, that's really great. Thank you very much, Tony, for spinning us up. Julia, first impressions, Audrey Rose.
Well, yes, agreed that it's way better than Exorcist 2. I don't think there's any question of that. I was disappointed by it because I am a big fan of Robert Wise. Wise. The Sound of Music is one of my favorite movies of all time, and several of the other films he's made. And I love Anthony Hopkins so much, and so I really wanted it to be better. I thought it was kind of flat and empty and dull myself.
Interesting.
So I didn't hate it, but I had higher expectations for it.
Wow, that's really great. And to catch up on what you said about Robert Wise, this movie being directed by Robert Wise, the significance of that is great. Robert Wise, directed The Haunting, which we've covered on this show, and is a truly fine horror film. He directed The Sound of Music. He directed West Side Story. He was a cinematographer on Citizen Kane. This guy has probably the best pedigree of anybody who's directed anything we've watched on this show, except, of course, for Hitchcock, who just made his own pedigree. Robert Wise is definitely classic movie royalty, and in this case, he's turned his attention to a family horror drama thing. And I really liked this film. My feeling was, this is exactly the kind of movie that I like. Now, I recommend these kinds of things all the time to people, but your mileage totally may vary, because what I like about this kind of movie, in an almost fetishistic way, is, it is one of those damp, autumnal, urban 1970s horror films that they just don't make anymore. So there's a very, wet-leafed horror film of the mid to late 70s that is kind of lost to us now. And this is a perfect example of the genre, and you could throw together a good list of this, and, Exorcist is definitely one, and The Omen, and those are both early 70s, and Let's Scare Jessica to Death, and stuff like that. So Tony's absolutely right. It feels to me like this could have been Exorcist 2, because it is about another fairly well-off young girl who begins exhibiting a personality that's not her own, and in many, many ways, it treads a lot of the same ground as The Exorcist 2 does, except for it deliberately goes in some different directions, some because of what kind of movie it is, and some because of just choices that the characters make that the characters in The Exorcist didn't make, because of sort of random differences, such as there are two parents in this one instead of one, and so there's more than one powerful person making decisions for this kid, and so on. So, I actually thought really, really worth seeing, and I was deeply disturbed by it. I found it very frightening. Part of that is probably being a parent. That may make some difference. Who knows?
Yes, sure.
So we can talk about that a little bit more as well. So, okay, let's get into it. This movie begins with a car accident, and I'll touch on that really quickly because we go through it really fast. But just like the beginning of The Changeling, starring George C. Scott, this movie begins with the destruction of most of a family in an automobile accident, which must have been a fixation among people in the 70s, because here it's raining, somebody's driving down a road, we find out it's in Pennsylvania, a car, a woman and her daughter are driving, on a slick highway. Car runs off the road.
Well, no, not to be nitpicky about this, but that car accident did not make any sense to me at all.
Okay.
Like, where did that car come from? It didn't run off the road. It came down this hill.
No, it ran off the opposing lane and crossed the median.
But it was like down a hill. I don't know. I just felt like it was kind of a weirdly filmed.
I believed it, but the way it works is they're on one side of the highway. Zoom, zoom, zoom. They're going, let's say, north in Pennsylvania. And then all of a sudden, across the grassy highway, which even has trees dividing it, from the highway going in the opposite direction, that's a car comes off of that road, loses control, comes off, goes down the hill, and comes right into the highway, and there's a head-on collision.
I guess I just didn't see it lose control. All I saw was the car coming down this hill, and so I was like, where'd that car come from? But I guess maybe I just missed that it lost control on the other side.
Well, I mean, and we didn't see it.
Okay. Well, that's what I would have liked to have seen that. But anyway, once it's on its way, it's really quite terrifying because it's so quiet. Like, there's no music, there's no crazy noise. It's just the windshield wiper, the sound of the windshield wipers, and this car coming at them, and then there's like this accident. And so I was actually very realistic in that regard.
It's a very effective car accident.
Yeah.
And I've seen a few things like this before. Like I say, in the beginning of The Changeling, you have a case where, in that case, George C. Scott and his wife and his daughter are driving in their station wagon. They get out. They park by the side of the road because George C. Scott needs to make a phone call, and he runs across the street to a phone booth. And so the daughter and the mom are like playing in the snow or whatever crazy stuff they're doing, and then a truck runs over them, and that's the way that movie starts. This is just like that. We begin. We don't have the father in the car, but we begin by wiping out a couple of people, and then we cut to New York.
Yeah, we don't know who these people are.
We don't know who any of these people are.
An accident.
We just know there was a bad accident. Now we cut to 1970s New York, and Robert Wise takes his time showing you scenes of this really lovely, fairly affluent white couple in, just hanging out in Central Park, and they've got a daughter, and they're basically doing all the ice cream cone and just everything that you can do just wandering around the park. They're feeding the animals and everything. And it really has, if you just want to look at what Central Park looks like in 1976 or so, this is definitely it for you. And all this does is to set us up with the fact there's this nice family. They have an 11-year-old girl. She's funny and precocious and smart, and the dad is a partner at a big ad agency. The mom is, whatever. We don't know what Marsha Mason's past is, but she's smart and lovely and all that.
She seems to be a homemaker.
So they're right, and she's a happy homemaker now. So this is them. They're a picture-perfect family. And then this is really great. Before anything supernatural starts happening, they start being stalked by this weird man who's just following them around.
Which is really creepy. And like you said, as a parent especially, but I think to anybody, especially in this day and age with all the, all the stuff that we hear about sexual predators, pedophiles.
Do you guys think it would be any different today? Like, what is Anthony Hopkins doing? And would it be different?
It's only different in that it wasn't as big a fear in the 70s as it is now. Like, people weren't constantly thinking everybody was out to molest their child. You know what I mean? It just wasn't, I don't think. I don't know.
I think it taps into something, though. I think there was, the reason we have the beginning of this movie is some of that. And there's, Invasion of the Body Snatchers came back around and stuff like that. So I think there's something there. It's not pervasive in the media maybe, but they were tapping into something that was going on. And I think that, I don't know if it's more now. It may be different now, but I think, there was something going on there because that, the whole spate of horror movies kind of like this as well. We're tapping into something. So I don't know if it's more, but it's definitely, I think it's just different.
Well, all I know is,
super creepy.
As a parent, the idea, and I'm sure as a non-parent you can identify with it, but as a parent, for sure, the idea that somebody would be obsessed with your child is terrifying. You know what I mean? It's really terrifying.
No, that's not cool.
Yeah,
it's very, and just to give you some more examples for the listener, so they start to see this guy just showing up. He's following them on the trains.
Well, and then he calls when the little girl doesn't show up to school to see if she's okay.
Right. First, Marsha Mason notices that he's just hanging out by the door of the school, watching from across the street, and the dad. And what's really interesting is these parents both have noticed him, but have both failed to mention him to the other parent. And then finally, when the girl doesn't show up for school one day because she's just playing sick, the mom decides, I'll let you stay home. Anthony Hopkins calls on the phone and says, "Is Ivy okay? She wasn't there today." And that's that's so weird.
Well, you're doing Silence of the Lambs. He wasn't quite that creepy.
But no, you're right. But and by the way, it is a young, in this case, at this point, bearded Anthony Hopkins who's just standing around in a raincoat. And, so he's a picture of a weird man obsessed with your 11-year-old who's going to call and say, he even he does something else strange, which is that he sneaks her a gift. They come home after shopping, the dad and the 11-year-old, and she goes, "Oh, you got me this wonderful early birthday present, which is a nice, it's a purse, and it's an expensive purse." And it turns out Anthony Hopkins bought it and slipped it in their bag. All of this is crazy town, and at this point in the movie, this is Robert Wise. This movie could be about jack anything. It could just simply be, this is going to be a stalker movie about how they deal with this crazy man who's obsessed with their daughter, which would be interesting. I can't think of it.
And that's what I'm thinking. That's what I'm saying. This film feels to me at that point like a Lifetime movie, which is great if it's a Lifetime movie, but kind of, not exactly what I would expect out of an exorcism-style movie.
Well, and because none of that stuff has started happening yet. And
exactly.
Then,
that's what I'm saying. It kind of takes forever to
well, but remember what William Friedkin was doing at this point in his film. In his film, in the first 20 minutes or so, he's showing us Ellen Burstyn acting. He's showing us Reagan, the little girl, is hanging out with the governors. I mean, it was also a bunch of nonsense. I mean, I don't remember much happening in the beginning of The Exorcist, although I'd have to go back and check it out again. But basically, what kicks the supernatural storyline into motion is that the little girl starts to have nightmares. Very strange ones, where she's screaming and crying, and then very soon she has a really weird, vivid dream where she gets up and starts running around the room and banging her hands on the windows. I don't think this is at the point where she burns herself, but just to sort of bring it together, she starts having these very vivid nightmares where she gets up, screams, she's going through something terrible, and at the same time, Anthony Hopkins becomes much more insistent that he must see these parents. And so Anthony Hopkins has basically weaseled his way into their lives enough that they go out for cognac with him at the restaurant downstairs, and he gives this he shaves off his beard so he looks much more presentable, and Anthony Hopkins gives this long speech explanation of why he's obsessed, which is to say, my daughter died in a car accident. I think she has been reborn as your daughter. And that's going to be more or less the question of the rest of the film is that true? You know, is what Anthony Hopkins thinks is happening what in fact is happening? You know, is this little girl possessed?
Yeah, I've been told by two psychics.
Yes, right. He talked to two, and he sounds crazy. It's really a great sequence because it's a little overlong. I think this conversation goes on way too long, but he tells this story. Yeah, I met two different psychics at two different cocktail parties. They told me my daughter's been reborn as a girl, you know, a girl in a really nice apartment in New York. And
describe the apartment to the detail.
Absolutely, but they stare at him. It is so cool because Marsha Mason and John Beck are very skilled actors who spend this really long sequence just listening to him rattle on, and they just stare in equal parts, like bored and also a little uncomfortable and also just waiting for him to please get to the point, which he takes forever to do. And Anthony Hopkins is really interesting here. Have you guys seen Anthony Hopkins at this juncture in his career before?
Yeah. Oh man, I'm trying to think. I mean, there's plenty of good young Anthony Hopkins movies. I'm drawing a blank right now, but
I'm looking at his thing, his IMDb, to see what he made. So
certainly Elephant Man, Lion and Winter. But
the 10. It says it's a 2.
Oh, what about Magic? There was one where he played.
Oh yeah.
I mean, mostly he was doing TV
Oh man,
series.
that Magic ad scared the crap out of me as a kid.
Yes.
The radio ad.
Magic was Anthony Hopkins was a ventriloquist with, I don't know, some kind of crazy dummy. Now let me tell you, I've never seen Magic, but yes, I was terrified by the ad.
Yeah, The Elephant Man is 3 years later, and I saw that, so I guess
Yeah, but this is if you're accustomed to older Anthony Hopkins, it's sort of strange to see him.
I don't know. He looks the same, except he's like redheaded.
He is redheaded. Yes. I think the fact that this long conversation that he gives, although it's wonderful because it gives Anthony Hopkins an opportunity to just sort of fly as you know, a very skilled thespian, but I think the reason the speech is overlong is that this screenplay has been written by the novelist, who created the book, Audrey Rose, and I think I think it's possible that he's just being a little overindulgent, and that somebody else taking this material might have cut that whole conversation down. I don't know. It's hard to say. It doesn't matter because it works okay. I mean, it works okay because you see them being uncomfortable. And then that they've heard his pitch. His pitch is basically, my daughter's reincarnated as your daughter. I'd love to spend time with her.
And they're like, buzz off, and then they get a call at the restaurant, and since they don't have cell phones, it's one of those, there's a call for you, sir, kind of calls.
Yeah, now how much did that come into your mind watching this movie? The fact that basically 1977 means there is no way of contacting anybody.
Right, well, so the sitter has to call the restaurant, so then they find out that she's, like, ill or
well, she's having another one of her episodes.
Yeah, exactly. And so they take off, which I guess leaving Anthony Hopkins to pay the bill, and then they take off, and he follows.
That's fine. He's a creep. They're like, I'm wondering
if they dined and dashed, because he seems to be hot on their heels.
He might have too. Yeah.
So they go up to the place, and she's freaking out. And so Anthony Hopkins goes up there, and the little girl, when she's freaking out, she's actually conscious. I mean, so what she has with her eyes open, she's screaming, "Daddy, Daddy, Daddy!" And
I don't think she's conscious.
No, she's got her eyes open.
She has her eyes open, but that doesn't mean
she's conscious as not as Ivy, but as this other in this. I mean, it's basically like she has multiple personality.
Yes.
And so she's conscious as Audrey Rose when she's screaming, "Daddy, Daddy." She's not. My point is, she doesn't have her eyes closed.
And she's beating on the windows, and she's burning her hands. And that's what's really crazy is her hands are getting burnt.
Even though there's
and
nothing.
Anthony Hopkins sees this. And he calls to her, and he calms her down by calling her Audrey Rose, and that's.
Well, he calms her down by saying, "Daddy's here, Daddy's right here,"
yes.
And then getting her to come over and hug him.
And then she goes back to sleep, and so, and now it's changed from Anthony Hopkins saying, "My daughter's been reborn as your daughter," to "My daughter's been reborn as your daughter, and she's freaking out." So. Instead of "I'd just like to visit her sometimes," it's, you're going to need me to keep her.
But that is so creepy. If you imagine that you've never met this man except for him stalking you, and now you've just talked to him for a few minutes, and now he's hugging your daughter and putting her to bed, it's freaking creepy.
It's extremely creepy.
Yeah.
And John Beck.
So creepy.
Why there's no instantly. We get the impression that they're pretty affluent. Am I correct? Like
they're rich as all. I mean,
and so
absolutely.
At that point, that's when you start. That guy has to know a judge or somebody, and you're like, restraining order now. How quickly can you get it? And the judge goes, "I'll send someone with that right now."
The dad is kind of trying to do that, but the wife feels like he can help. She sees that he's helping her daughter, so she's very conflicted because she's like, well, yeah, we don't want this creepy guy in our lives, but at the same time, he seems to be the only person who can help my daughter.
It comes to a really weird marital thing where Tony's exactly right. The way John Beck is thinking is, I need an injunction. He goes straight to his lawyer, and he says, "Hey, crazy guy hugging my daughter, has all these weird stories." And the lawyer says, "Hey, I'll get an injunction, but let's interview Tony Hopkins and see what we can find out."
That's where you go, no, I don't think that's happening. I think guy putting my daughter to, like, following us up to my apartment, putting my daughter to bed is a no-go. Like,
yeah.
that's not a thing.
And letting her call him daddy, like asking.
That's really weird. But here's something really interesting, and I just want to bring attention to this a little bit, because I think it might be possible as we go along that Anthony Hopkins is wrong about what's going on, and here's why. The attorney gives a speech while they're at the restaurant. The attorney says, "Hey, when I was a kid, my uncle or my grandpa, I can't remember what he said, but my grandpa after Shabbos used to, light the candles and regale us with stories of the Dybbuk, which was a possessing creature that's, and I was scared of, and in those moments I actually believed everything." Well, this is supposed to be about, hey, there's more things in heaven and earth. But let me tell you, I've been reading this book I have here in my hands, Between Worlds, Dybbuk's Exorcist and Early Modern Judaism. And a Dybbuk in the world of Jewish exorcism is not a demon like in the movie Possession by Sam Raimi, but is just a possessing spirit. It's another human that, for one reason or another, possesses somebody.
And so here's the thing. There are so many little things that could be going on here. I mean, it's not really an Exorcist type of story because it's not the devil, it's not a demon, like you said. But
they call those exorcisms. I mean,
yeah, but I don't see. I've never heard anybody refer to an exorcism to mean like a person as opposed to a demon. Like I don't think that's right. I don't know.
I'm just saying there's Divic tradition that allows for that to be the possession.
Well, and I'd never heard of that, but
Okay.
To me, what I was seeing was more like a multiple personality type of thing that was coming from this past life that this soul had, and there is plenty of past life tradition, lore or whatever that says that if you have issues in this life, it could be traced back to your past life. So if you're afraid of water, it could be because you drowned in your past life. But it doesn't manifest as multiple personality. It doesn't manifest that suddenly you are this other person, unless you're under hypnosis. But it doesn't manifest that you get into water, person respond to another name, just that you get into water and you flip out and you don't know why.
Right.
So it's kind of a strange story that way, and I guess that's what makes it supernatural instead of just, something that some people believe and other people don't. But I don't know. I just don't love it. I didn't love that whole thing.
Well, so I get where you're going at. You're saying that it's a little unclear, that it's troublesome that it's kind of unclear what's happening.
Because Anthony Hopkins keeps referring to it as reincarnation, but it's not a straight up reincarnation.
He thinks it is, right?
Yeah, but I'm saying that doesn't fit with what's going on.
And what's going on, because she has another. The movie escalates a lot now. She has another one of these episodes, same thing. Burning herself, injuring herself. She falls asleep and she wakes up having this terrible nightmare of Audrey Rose's fiery death. There's no doubt about it that's what's happening.
Yeah.
And that's super disturbing. And then something truly weird happens, and this movie goes in a direction that I'm just sitting there and going, this is a brave direction because I have no idea if this is right for the movie or not. But what ends up happening is that it becomes I almost don't want to say it out loud. It becomes a courtroom drama because Anthony Hopkins decides, screw this business of ministering to this child or visiting this child or hugging this child. I'm going to kidnap this child. He literally just steals the child and socks her away in his own apartment in the same building which he got, and then gets arrested. And then, to the listener who hasn't seen this movie, I can assure you this is actually what happens in this actual film. His defense to kidnapping is, no, I did not kidnap that girl because it's actually my daughter reborn.
Right. They said, is this your child? He said, yes.
This is the nutsiest thing. I have no idea if this is good or not. I think I've lost all capacity for understanding art at this point.
Well, it is weird also. I mean, the things that are happening, to set it aside, that truly shove it into the realm of supernatural is she's like, burning. She's getting burned when she touches, the cold
really
window
strange,
and all of that. So they're like, and that's one thing where everybody's just like, what the heck is going on?
Yeah.
Exactly.
It could have just been a psychodrama, but instead they actually do have her get burned.
And then
it
goes very quickly from there to Dad, like you said, this marital issue where Dad wants to have her, have this hypnotic procedure or whatever you would call it done, and the mom doesn't want to, and Anthony Hopkins is there somehow, and they're watching her go into her.
Oh well, no, I'll explain to you how that happened. I mean, they're in the trial. So there's one incident that I have to mention that happens before then, which is that they ship the girl while the trial of Anthony Hopkins goes on, and that trial is just a bunch of 1970s goo-goo.
About the kidnapping.
Yeah, about the kidnapping, but also basically literally they're bringing witnesses on to argue about whether or not reincarnation exists. Now, none of this makes any sense to me at all, because even if we decided, yes, even if the court could, for some reason, rule that there is such a thing as reincarnation, it seems to me that he is still a kidnapper. And even if Marsha Mason said, oh, I don't think he kidnapped the girl because we really need him to stop the girl's seizures, which she says at one point, I think the state can still get at Anthony Hopkins for kidnapping.
Yeah, of course.
I
mean, he clearly didn't go about this the right way.
Yeah.
You think? Maybe. Okay, there's. Hey, sending a letter of inquiry. Hey, I know this sounds crazy, but can you meet me? I'm having this thing going on. And then there's just like showing up wherever they are.
Yeah.
And then not only that, then when the parents for whatever reason decide like, okay, well, humor weirdo who's shaved his beard and shows up everywhere, gives our daughter stuff. At the point where he's putting her in bed, that's another thing. Like it doesn't.
Yes.
Yes, he is also a grieving parent. So we're kind of supposed to be like, man, poor guy. He's a grieving parent. Except every way that he goes about it is like really the wrong way to do what you want to do. Like we're having a hard time sympathizing with the guy who just follows you up.
He ends up being right, because what happens at the end? Do you want to force fast forward?
Wait. I don't want to, because I want to think a little bit more about what
I have some stuff about that too, but yes, we should continue linearly.
Before we get there, I just want to think of like a movie like The Fisher King. All right, Robin Williams is crazy because he witnessed this horrible traumatic act where his girlfriend got shot in the head by a crazy person who wandered into a bar, and Robin Williams is nuts, right? And so Robin Williams is a severely damaged man, and so all the crazy decisions he makes, nevertheless, you feel for him because you kind of get that somehow he's lost the capacity to know how to make the right decision. And it's sort of what's going on here, which is that Anthony Hopkins lost his daughter, and if you put yourself in his position, everything he's doing is nuts, but you kind of get that he's damaged enough that he doesn't quite get when stuff is inappropriate or how to act, how to conduct himself or anything, because he's just gone around the deep end. Nevertheless, we have a society where you can't let Anthony Hopkins near your daughter, and I think that's fair to say.
Yeah.
It's just that it turns out, though, unfortunately, that there is something really supernaturally wrong, and unlike Ellen Burstyn in The Exorcist, no one in this movie thinks to actually call a priest or anything. None of that happens.
Well, also, at the point where your daughter has transferred into another body, there's got to be some, maybe there's no legal precedent, but at some point you got to go, look, man, not my monkey, not my circus.
Yeah.
I'm sorry that your daughter is in my daughter, but you don't get to touch my daughter.
Right.
You had your chance, and that's too bad.
No, I'm with you.
Like, you're not putting her to bed in my house. You're not following me around. You're certainly not kidnapping her. And I don't know why we're on trial where your lawyer is like, hey, look, here's some supernatural. Because there's no, like, what? Holy crap. Here's something. What? The lawyer for Anthony Hopkins, what must that have been like when they're picking the jury?
Yes.
Like, these are your peers. And I've had, for some reason, the Eye of Sauron jury duty has come my way more than once. And I've luckily never been for a big one.
Okay.
But, where like my friends have, I had a friend who was like on a week, like several weeks long one where it was a car accident and it was really bad and all this stuff. But the way they weed out people, who are these juries like that both of them agreed on?
Yeah.
With this case, holy moly, that must have been.
Have you ever encountered reincarnation? Have you ever thought about reincarnation? Are you open to reincarnation?
Right.
Like,
how
do you feel about kidnapping? Would you like to have a person who is the father of your child's reincarnated?
Oh, you can throw, like the people, these are the people they didn't throw out, like immediately.
Yeah, right.
Funny.
And Beck, the dad, by the way, has every right to be pissed when he's out, whatever he's doing. He's out. He's not even having an affair. There's not even any misbehavior on his part. He's out doing some work-related thing.
Yes.
Marsha Mason's upset because she's having a stressful time with the kid. This is all domestic drama stuff, and totally understand.
Hello?
And, so she sees, that Anthony Hopkins is available when her husband is not available. And the movie skirts for a while at that drama in particular, is he was here and you weren't. The movie drops it pretty quickly. But
when is that ever? Man, this the more you talk it through, the more I'm like, wow, series just bad decision after bad decision.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, and then when is that? Man, she doesn't have anybody else. Well, he does soothe her. Yeah, the kidnapper.
Yes.
Like,
yeah, he comes over and he calms down the girl who's having another one of her real freak out episodes. Now look, this is all metaphorical, Families have children who will suddenly, you think you've made it through all the hard years, and all of a sudden something weird starts happening. Some chemical problem just kicks in, and you've got something on your hands that you're not equipped to handle. But random wacko from outside the school is not the guy to be.
Yeah, almost anybody. Like the door. I think you could trust the doorman that you've known for years more than stalker guy. But I will have to say that the actress who plays Audrey Rose, Ivy, she is really good at if you're gonna have a kid freak out.
Good kid.
Although, man, she can play crazy like nobody's business.
I thought she was great. Yeah, I thought she was great.
This child is a scary actress. I mean, I was really terrified for her, and I was worried about the kid. I mean, I was really are you going to be screwed up by this, experience?
Yeah.
Because, good God, I don't know what her name is.
I don't think so, because all she had to do was scream "Daddy." I mean, kids that age are not really. It's not like with The Exorcist where she's having to say all the F word a bunch of times.
Yeah, but I think she played kind of Crazy Town really good. Like her face and her expressions. She reminded me also of like she could look like when they show devil dolls sometimes.
Yeah, but my kids
her eyes are really wide.
Could do that, and it wouldn't screw them up.
It turns out, by the way, this young woman is named Susan Swift. She was born in 1964. She doesn't act anymore. She has 7 children.
Wow.
She is an attorney in Los Angeles, and she attended Pepperdine University. So I guess things worked out for her.
Go Susan.
Yeah.
No, yeah, she was fantastic. I really thought she did a great job.
She's good. She's good with her eyes. She's really good at even doing this really complicated thing of I'm in the spell, and now I'm going to wake up from it and see you. My eyes are going to focus on the person I'm talking to. And that's all, I don't think I could do that because I don't act, It's all pretty good. I've seen bad kid actors, but this is a good kid. Anyway, Anthony Hopkins goes on trial for kidnapping the girl. We have a bunch of really dumb, and I know I'm sounding like I don't like this movie, but we have a bunch of witnesses who talk about whether or not there's such a thing as reincarnation. And then while Ivy is at the girls' school that she's attending, she has a really so this is a good scary episode that also just is a piece very out of a 70s horror film, because they're making this the girls at this Catholic school are making this giant near druidic it's a sort of a Green Man
bonfire.
It's a bonfire with a giant
snowman.
A snowman is so big they have to build a scaffolding to keep building it. And it's got a fir tree crown, and they're going to set the freaking thing on fire somehow or another. Giant bonfire surrounding this enormous pagan symbol. It's really strange. And anyway, Ivy is there, and she is transfixed by the fire and starts walking towards the fire. And you're worried for a second because the nun, only one nun, who is not actually supervising at the time, a nun who's looking out the window from the school, sees that Ivy has become hypnotized by this stuff and is walking towards the fire. She's crawling into the fire, and that's really scary. And it's a well done scene.
It doesn't make sense, though. I mean, why would she do that if she was?
If possessed by the spirit of Audrey Rose, why would she want to burn herself?
Yeah, you would think it'd be the other way around. You think she would have an unnatural fear of the fire and scream and flip out rather than going toward it.
I guess we're supposed to think it's inevitable, the circle of life. When she realizes it, you would think it would be an aversion, but I think it's more of that's where I belong kind of thing, which is really weird, but it kind of makes sense in a strange sort of way.
No, I can buy it. I mean, that's a good Marvel no prize explanation for it. But I think it's literally just Robert Wise has invented a pretty good little.
But maybe she likes. Then she might just like snowmen.
Right. she just wants to get to the snowman.
I love snowmen so much I'm willing to brave fire.
What I love is the crabby meanness of the nuns, because she doesn't make it into the fire, but she does burn herself pretty good, but not like seriously. She just like singes herself. But she goes to the hospital and she's got like, sort of a red face from getting too close and stuff. And the nuns, when Marcia Mason goes to visit her daughter, because they've moved her to the school, it's like out of town, it's upstate. Marcia Mason comes to visit in a motel, but they're at the hotel, and the nun says, "I want you to know this kind of thing has never happened before. This is your daughter's fault." And the nun is just golly. I was like, why would you want to surround yourself with these unpleasant, mean women? I don't.
Oh man, yeah, they're like, look at what she's done. Like,
I'm sure most nuns
burn herself to death. Whatever.
I've nothing against nuns in particular. I'm just saying these nuns.
No, those nuns are horrible.
Yes, they're
just. I mean, that's just flat out mean.
Yeah.
Hey, I thought you were supposed to be compassionate. Well,
right.
She really inconvenienced us all by trying to jump in the fire. I mean, come on. Why don't you control your kid better? She's that person. Your kid tried to jump in the fire. Why don't you control your kid better?
Yes.
She's burned up. Well, think of how the rest of us feel. What? Like. Yeah.
Well, and when you think about it, okay, so there's this movie's only look at the Catholic Church, because remember in The Exorcist loves Catholicism. It believes sincerely that priests are struggling, but it loves the church.
I feel like we need to talk about the ending if we're going to talk about this.
Well, now it's time to get to the ending.
Yes.
Because
it turns out that both Anthony Hopkins and the Catholic Church are more correct than the people in this movie, because the rest of the people in the movie, because they put the poor girl under hypnosis, and she starts to have he brings her back to different points in her own life, and then he brings her past that to before her life, and so the hypnotist brings her to the death of Audrey Rose, and he cannot bring her back out of it. And in fact, she dies. I mean, she dies from this hypnosis, which is absurd. And of course, Anthony Hopkins is trying to help her, but they won't let him get to her.
She causes herself. Now,
so he actually breaks the window and tries to get to her, but there's not enough time.
Yeah.
But whatever happens, but that doesn't. That's, again, hypnosis does not work that way. You would never die from hypnosis. That's just not how it's going to work. And so that's completely unrealistic.
In the world of the movie, the hypnosis triggers one of her possession events, which causes her to relive the fiery death, which up until now has always been interrupted by one thing or another. But
in real life, past life regression would never cause you to die just because you relive the death. It doesn't cause you to die.
Oh,
Ever. It just doesn't happen.
How often have you had supernatural past life regression?
That's what I'm saying.
In your face, Julia.
It's not.
Well, that's why I think that Anthony Hopkins is wrong about what's going on. I think that she's not reincarnated. I think she's possessed by an unhappy spirit.
Right, and so
I mean, it kind of is in a way, but yeah, it plays it pretty fast and loose.
So what I was going to say was, if you have the Catholic Church, then you could deal with that whole unhappy, or even not necessarily Catholic Church, but anybody who does
Church,
or anybody who does like any kind of shaman or any kind of person who does the what did I say, the seances, like anybody who does anything other than just regular Western science maybe would have had a chance with this because it is supernatural, but they don't try any of that, and so therefore, I think the moral of this movie is always bring in, people who believe in supernatural stuff.
I'm telling you,
or you were going to be.
If I were writing this to be closer to The Exorcist, look, they've already given it to you. You already set up. You have what's called I think they're called in the screenplay books. They're called a stinger scene, or it's a pinch. Anyway, there's been this little scene that teased the solution, which is, hey, my grandfather used to tell me these stories about the Dybbuk, and it was scary. And all you got to do is call a rabbi who knows something about Dybbuks and do like a big Hasidic exorcism, and because as far as I'm concerned, this is a Jewish possession. This is a Jewish-style Dybbuk possession, and so what we need is a hard-hitting Hasidic motherfucker to come in and say some Hebrew over this guy. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't happen. That is not, it's terrifying, by the way, just like it's terrifying to watch Mina. Yeah, it's Mina. It's terrifying to watch Mina die in the 1979 movie when she suffocates. Watching any child suffocate is just unbelievable. And in this one, she asphyxiates right in front of them because all of these people have put their faith in science, and it doesn't save them. And it's just astonishing. I mean, that just blew me away. I mean,
what's even crazier about the whole thing is that by the end, the mom is totally like, you know what, you were totally right.
Yeah.
We're all good. At least we knew, at least we all know this now. And she was meant to go round and round, and we're all going to get reincarnated and all this stuff. Mm-hmm. And her reaction, when the actual reaction, this is what I was thinking, is like, thanks for starting this roller coaster, or dive like straight down this crash by coming into our lives, Anthony Hopkins, which we were just fine until you showed up.
I think actually that part has to do with the fact that the girl is now the age that Audrey Rose was when she died. I think that's why it all started.
Well, but what are we to make of this final scene?
I think it's a lot of like, but.
I guess Audrey Rose.
Any normal parent would be like, this crap did not happen, and we decided to do this regression. You kidnapped her. Who knows what that did to her psyche?
Yeah.
And instead, she's like, oh, you know what? All the stuff you said, you're totally right. The way she asphyxiated and burned up, like, looked like she was on fire for a while. Thanks. No, it's all good. Thanks, Anthony Hopkins. You're the best.
I think you're reading it exactly right and appropriate.
No, nobody thinks that. Like, that's what's so crazy is no one calls them out and goes, you know what? Screw you, dude. None of this started happening until you started creeping on us and our daughter. And, the mom, like, for whatever, maybe it's just her way of dealing with it, too.
I think it's a coping mechanism. I think it's just like the end of any other horror movie where at the end you have the character sitting in a loony bin reciting some bullshit about, how they think this or that. And you're supposed to know when you look at them that everything they're saying is nonsense. Except for here, the nonsense she's saying has a ring of sincerity that makes you go, I'm lost at this point as to whether the movie believes this or not. And I have no idea.
It's just like, that's what I kept coming back to, though. I'm like, man, and the picture of her that's like by the grave or wherever they're at, where it's her just making the crazy eyes.
Yes.
Like it doesn't look like she's smiling. Like this is her. The picture looks like, here's the picture of her when things are just really going off
I like
track.
This picture near me because it reminds me of when she was crazy. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. It's like,
you're right.
why these decisions? And this is, again, like, I still like this movie. But, like, man, it goes a lot of places that reality isn't part of it.
It's a very surprising film. It's very different from a lot of other stuff. And I have to say, like you said, it would be a good Exorcist 2 because it is a disturbing film in the way that Exorcist 2 is disturbing.
Right, but it's a better Exorcist 2, that's for sure.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, because Exorcist 2 ultimately isn't about anything, whereas this has a lot of themes. I think there's probably too many themes. It's not a perfect movie or anything, but do you get the impression this sort of somber, bummer horror movie? You don't see a lot of them anymore. Am I right about that, or is that just fuddy-duddyism? Am I wrong?
I don't know, man. Come to Fantastic Fest, you'll see a lot of bummer movies that are just as. Oh yeah, I mean I can think of 2 or 3 right off the head.
The Devil's Rejects is a bummer and all that.
No,
but okay.
I'm saying a lot of there's a lot more than you think. They're just you may not see them
Yeah, you get lost.
They're not getting as wide release, perhaps. They're more, you're seeing them at festivals and stuff. I just, like we were talking about earlier, I just saw 35 movies, in 8 days, and a huge chunk of those were definitely of the bummer town kind of. In fact, one that just got picked up called, in German it means I see, but they subtitled it Goodnight Mommy. Man, by the end of that, woof, it's rough. I saw a lot of rough movies there, but I think I think they're out there. They may not be getting as wide a release, perhaps. I don't know.
No, that's a fair comment, and I'll have to look up I see. And to be sure, remember how much I loved House of the Devil when we talked about that movie and how it sort of captured a certain look. To some extent, I enjoy these movies both for the movie itself, but also for their timestamp, for the texture and everything of the 70s, or whatever they are, because we watch a lot of movies, right? And so I enjoy the timestamp. This movie looks like it was made in the 70s and could be made no other time, or this movie is definitely, a mid-90s, horny teenager movie. There's all these different kinds of films that are just perfectly stamped, and they can only exist when they exist. Well, we should probably wrap up our final thoughts and then come around for endorsements. What an exciting movie to discuss. All right, Tony, final thoughts, Audrey Rose.
I like it. I don't think it's not a movie that's going to stick with me. It's not one for the ages for me, but it's good. It's got solid performances, lots of great acting. Even if the actors are doing crazy things where you want to yell at the screen, like, why are you doing this thing that you're doing? The girl in it, she's great as troubled and traumatic and, everything. I think she goes for broke as far as that goes. I think it's probably especially scary for people with kids, and even with younger siblings and younger cousins. I was still like, whoa, this is not cool, or having to watch. I've done my fair share of watching my younger, kid off and on, and all of that is super scary. Double so if you're a parent. It's insane. Like, I still am in awe at some of the choices that they're made, but it makes a good horror movie, I suppose. I don't know if I'd watch it a lot, but it's solid. It's worth checking out, And it does have what you were talking about. It's got a solid, like, this is the 70s, It's
for sure. Was this your first time
window? I think so. I think I'd seen part of it before, but I definitely hadn't seen it all the way through. Like, this was definitely my first time seeing it, from front to back.
Yeah. Julia, final thoughts, Audrey Rose?
Having discussed it, I guess my complaint is, it's less that it's dull. I think I said dull. It's really not dull. It's just, I feel like it's kind of uneven. Like, it just kind of goes all over the place. It wants to be an after-school special. It wants to be a Lifetime movie. It wants to be a, movie about psychological thriller, not thriller, but psychological, character study kind of thing. And it kind of wants to be a supernatural thriller, but not really, just for a few minutes here and there. I don't know. So I kind of just can't decide. I don't think it decides what it wants to be and commits to that. But, the performances are good, and it definitely made me feel things. Like I said, it's a terrifying prospect, not only that this person is obsessed with your child, but that your child is suffering in this way. It's horrible. Yes. So, as a parent, yeah, for sure, it affected me on that level. It's got its strengths, but it's not one of my favorites.
I agree with you. My final thoughts, it's very disturbing, and nevertheless, it's very disturbing, and it feels up until the end like a fairly safe film, and then it goes in directions that make you feel very unsafe. And so I actually really enjoyed Audrey Rose, and I had never seen this movie before, ever. This is one of those movies where I'd seen the poster 1,000 times, and people say, oh, this is a good companion to The Exorcist. but I had never seen it. And this is another one, Tony, by the way, where everybody who writes about it is always like, this really isn't a horror movie. This is a thriller. And I mean, unlike The Exorcist, they'll say, and you go look at The Exorcist and all the writing about that, this isn't really a horror movie. We like to think of this as whatever the hell. But I mean, and you realize, geez, when will anybody be willing to call their film a horror film? Because this is a horror movie, for the love of Pete, There's nothing else that I could call.
No, this one less than, for sure, The Exorcist.
Oh, come on. I mean, there's basically...
I don't think it is. I don't think of it as a horror movie.
You don't think of it as a horror movie? Mm-hmm. What would you call this film?
That's what I'm saying. It doesn't know what it wants it to be. It's kind of a thriller. It's kind of a psychological study. Like, it doesn't know.
Oh,
but it's definitely not a horror movie. It's got horror
moments. I don't know what
moments.
that means. It may not know what it wants to be, but it is a horror movie. There's just no doubt in my mind. It's it's got a little girl running around who thinks she's on fire. It's got weird
who actually
possessions.
burns up supernaturally.
Yes, and even the supernatural piece isn't required. Now, here's a good question. We've done over 100 episodes. Can we even define horror? Don't answer that on this show. It would take its own entire show. But to me, there's no doubt in my mind this is a horror film. Because you're not supposed to come out of it going, I want to think more about, about how to stop stalkers, or I want to think more about reincarnation. That is not it at all. You come out going, boy, that was scary. I found myself quite scared at the end,
I wasn't scared. I was just upset that she was dead. That really pissed me off.
Well, and also there's the question of...
And that's not going to fix any problems. It's just this soul's just going to keep popping around from body to body. They didn't even... That's the thing. It's like, at least if they'd had a good, religious or what's the word for, people who do, seances and stuff. What would you call that? I mean, like if they had like a medium or a priest or somebody, or even the rabbi or whatever, somebody in there that would have taken care of the issue, then maybe it would be an end. But it almost like they left it open for the sequel because there's no resolution.
There is a sequel. There is a novel called For the Love of Audrey Rose, which apparently actually gives you a conclusion that turns out to be a complete flip and surprise from what's going on here. So apparently the novelist, and I don't know what it is, and I don't really want to be spoiled for it in case I read it sometime, but apparently the novelist provides an extra layer where it's like nothing you've seen so far is exactly what it seemed, and it's all complicated.
Please tell me she ends up it's like All of Me, and she is actually in Anthony Hopkins' body, and hilarity ensues.
That would be really awesome. And by the way, nice call out for All of Me. I haven't thought about that movie in a long time. Oh wow,
that's what I'm hoping. That's going to be. I'm not going to read it. I'm just going to picture that, and it's going to be Anthony Hopkins. And wow, how weird would that be though? Anthony Hopkins also possessed by a teenager.
Yes, and
they have to settle their differences and live together in a body. Craziness.
Good
That's the novel that I'm going to go with. That is. Would be quite a surprise. It would be both disturbing and comedic. That's for sure. It would be way more disturbing than All of Me, though.
I would actually like to see Anthony Hopkins wandering around trying to figure out how to get his body back from a teenage girl that's controlling it. I think that does have a lot of really, really crazy comedic possible. But I gotta say,
I can't wear that to school.
Well, he'd find himself backstage at a Jonas Brothers concert.
It's like Freaky Friday.
But Jonas Brothers dates me, of course. I don't even think that's where the kids are today.
No, of course
not. It doesn't matter. Plus, it's Anthony Hopkins, so it doesn't matter what era. It's going to be wrong.
Yes.
Anyway, there we go. Somebody out there who's a film fan, you can, we'll work on. If any of these ideas are ones you want to get, contact my agent, and we'll start this in Firestark. It'll be really good.
Firestark, yeah.
We'll roll here.
I got to say, Audrey Rose was a huge hit novel, okay? This is one of those novels that sold like 2 million copies. Everybody had the paperbacks. I am a complete 1970s horror novel fetishist. I love the way that novels from that period were art directed. I love the way they were designed and the crazy, especially when they had like embossed covers and stuff like that. You who are young and have missed out on the universe of mass market paperbacks, this was a thing that used to happen, and it was awesome. And it makes me sad that it's going. I don't know if you guys have ever looked out your windows, but mass market paperbacks are disappearing. Basically, you still have them at supermarkets, but every year they're just dropping precipitously, basically because people are now reading on their iPhones, which is great. But all of that, all those moments lost in time. Yeah. So, yeah, the kids. Okay. I already got your final thoughts, Julia. Yes, I did. Okay, and my final thoughts have already been said. I'm not going to waste any of you guys' time with yet more of this. We should go straight to our endorsements. Tony, you saw 35 movies in the past,
I did.
Yes. So
a huge chunk of them were horror movies, or at least thrillers, or some combo of those. So I'm probably going to write it all down and parcel those out over the next few, because I think there's a lot. Maybe I'll start mentioning more and more so that they get. Because the big thing with a festival is, a lot of these movies are looking for distribution, or the filmmakers are there to try to say, hey, here's my film, don't you want to watch this, get the word out. And, that's kind of what I like to do. I talked to a few people about maybe even once, if we do an interview kind of segment, when we get on. And the two I'm going to mention that stick out firmly in the horror genre are a movie called The Babadook, which, by the way, I don't have kids. I like kids. It's great, but this did not convince me to really want kids, and it's super scary. A woman, a single mom, is having problems with her kid who's, he doesn't have a dad, and he's kind of going through some stuff, and they're both going through some stuff, and there's a boogeyman called the Babadook that comes into play, and holy cow, this movie, scary as crap. And again, if you are a parent, I don't know if this is your movie or not. It goes some places. I will say that I thought it was going certain places, and I was also about to roll my eyes at some of the places I thought it was going, and it goes totally different. I was pretty impressed. The actress who plays the mom is great. The kid's great too at playing just, terrified, and also the worst kid but the best kid, precocious kid who's, she's trying to keep it together, and he is too. It's really it was scary, and they're wanting to make the Babadook book that appears, which kind of launches things. And I'm like, heck no, I don't want the Babadook book in my house. This is another one of those scary things where you're just like, no, don't make that. I don't want that creature. So I hope that they make the book, because that is a cool thing, but I will not be buying that just because I've seen enough horror movies.
What's it called?
The Babadook. And I'll post the trailer, and it's scary. Another one was a lower budget film, zombie film called Wormwood with a Y, done by a group from Australia, which I met, and they were really awesome. Their makeup effects were done by a makeup artist who had done makeup, then became a forensic, I don't know if you'd call her a forensic pathologist, but, deals with dead bodies in various forms of decomposition, then went back to do the makeup for this. So the makeup on the zombies is really awesome. It does a bunch of things that are really cool. It's low budget, but that, doesn't, for the budget they had, it looks great. And it was done as a labor of love. I think if I remember correctly, they would probably correct me. I think they said over 4 years. shooting, weekends or vacations or whenever they had time. And, I saw it late at night, but I didn't see that it felt like 4 years, And they were really, really cool. Came in from Australia to come to Austin to hang out and show their film. That's also awesome. But yeah, and I told them, maybe we could have. I'd like to do more, indie film because it's definitely indie. This is a labor of love. And so whenever, I don't know when it'll be out, but I think Babadook will probably get put out in some form somehow. It's Wormwood, we'll see, but I highly recommend those. And, I got to see the Lost Soul director, which is a documentary about the Isle of Dr. Moreau. The Isle of Dr. Moreau, as Richard Stanley, the guy who made Hardware, was supposed to be on that, and it turns horribly awry. Goes horribly awry for him. It goes kind of off the rails big time. But when we got that, we got a copy of Hardware, which I hope to cover one day on this podcast because I really like it. But the Blu-ray for Hardware, if you can get a copy, tons of extras. I binged on that. And so that was what I did when I was doing other stuff and recovering from Fantastic Fest, was watched everything I could Hardware on that Blu-ray. And it's Severin Films put it out, and they did a fantastic job. So if you're a fan of, a monster in the house type of movie that's sci-fi, Hardware does it really well for its budget, and it's great. The Blu-ray is fantastic. So if you don't have the Blu-ray,
Dylan McDermott, right? As the
Dylan McDermott as one of his earlier roles. And by the way, trivia. And I know I'm going kind of long, but the trivia is, the tagline where he reads from the Bible first, Mark 13, where it ends with no flesh shall be spared. Dylan McDermott actually was looking up stuff. He's like, hey, I should go look in the Bible. He looked at Mark 13 and he discovered that as the which made it into the script, which made it
very cool.
as the tagline. But, Richard Stanley, the director, writer, a lot. Who would fess up to like, oh no? Usually people are like, oh no, we came up with that, blah blah blah. But he totally
came up with the best line. Yeah.
Yeah, Dylan McDermott. He's like, yeah, he went to his room and we discovered that, and that was cool. And by the way, Richard Stanley's also a really awesome dude with tons of amazing stories. He lives in the mountains in France where a bunch of pagans were slaughtered by crusaders at one point, and yet it's this beautiful place where he lives. Just really fascinating, genuine, great guy to just listen to stories too. So I know. Sorry if I was long-winded, but
no,
like I'm still recovering from Fantastic Fest, and I'll have a few more recommendations to spread across both the site and the podcast over the next few podcasts. So.
I think that's truly fantastic. By the way, that documentary, I can't wait to see it. The one about the making of Island of Dr. Moreau, because I saw that version of Island of Dr. Moreau, and it's one of the weirdest experiences I've ever had watching a movie, because you really, I don't know if you've seen it recently, but
they did. Master Pancake did it during the fest.
There are points where you're not sure. Like one scene will just end, and suddenly we're in the next scene, and you're like, well, wait, what happened to those guys? How did they get here? What happened to the conflict that was going on there?
Oh, it's
Who's
a mess.
That person?
It's a total, like, once you see the documentary, you realize, like, man, it's a mess, and it's screwed up in all sorts of ways.
I think we could do a Dr. Moreau retrospective and do, like...
Ooh, no, I've seen it. Like, I saw it in Master Pancake, and you don't want to do that. Although one of the guys did pass by during the skit, and I became known as that Dracula-looking motherfucker right there.
I was so excited about that. I read about that, yes.
Which
that's right.
I had to tell him the story of, Billy's mom calling me the Dracula, because I thought that was funny. But, there you go.
But that's your name on our...
and that's why it's the Dracula. It's not because of the Castle of Horror. It's because I actually have been called the Dracula, which I think is supremely hilarious each time.
Awesome.
So cool.
All right, Julia, do you have any endorsements for us?
Oh, I'm just in seventh heaven with, like I said, TV premiere month. So for me, it's just my usual, my Shonda Rhimes Thursday night. I have not gotten a chance to watch. I have it on the DVR. I haven't gotten a chance to watch the new edition of what's it called? How to Get Away with Murder? Is that the name of it?
I did something like that.
Yeah. Anyway, I got to watch that, so I'll let you know what I think when I see it, because I haven't watched last week's. But yeah, I'm just happy. That's all.
All right. Well, all I have to talk about is that I've been reading about Divox and Jewish exorcisms for the last couple of weeks. So my endorsement of the week is this really great book called it's Between Worlds: Divox, Exorcists, and Early Modern Judaism by J.H. Chas, and I'll put something about it on the blog, and I mean, that's all I've been doing, just reading this and working on the novel, so I haven't had a chance to see anything, except for I have one more thing that I want to recommend. I have started putting our Castle of Horror episodes onto YouTube, just to give people another way of listening to our shows. But that's a long process because we have a lot of episodes. So I'll do 7 or 10 a week, and that'll, and soon enough they will all be up there. But if you go to YouTube and you look for Castle of Horror, you can find playlists that already have our retrospective on the Halloween movies and on Halloween-related movies, because I thought those would be good for October, and also several of our more popular vampire films. Our Dracula,
Please tell me that you have approved comments turned on. And if not, please do that. Because here's my middle finger to YouTube commenters. I think they're the lowest of the low. No, not YouTube commenters, but the way comments go on YouTube, it is a cesspool. So
yeah, because somebody
I advise that
this movie features Anthony Hopkins. I object to Anthony Hopkins and what he said about Rainforest in 1983, and somebody will start arguing with that person. Yeah. Now that hasn't happened yet because we just now put it up, so people have not yet discovered these things.
I do that on all of my channels because guess what? Even though it's Google's house, I'm renting that room, and I get to say who comes into my dorm room. Mm-hmm. And so please, I beg of you, do that.
All right, done. I will make it so. I will totally make it so. And for the listeners, totally check it out. Leave comments. I will approve them. And also on iTunes, leave us reviews. We've had some of the best reviews, and I've been so happy about it.
Thanks,
the Facebook
people.
page. Yeah, go ahead, Tony. I'm sorry.
No, I said thanks, people. I was just cooperating. That's awesome. We really appreciate it.
It means so much, and we want to keep doing it. So leave us comments, tell your friends, pass it along. Come, listen to us on iTunes. Leave reviews on iTunes. It helps people find the show. Whatever else. And we want to hear from you. If you want a particular retrospective put up on YouTube, I can change around the order that I'm going to get to them. So just let us know. And we're going to start a really interesting Halloween retrospective next week that is going to be just some creepy movies that we've got together with a general consensus around hauntedness. But that's all I'll say right now because I have to find a proper excuse to string these movies together. But it's going to be pretty awesome, I promise. Thank you, everybody. And Tony and Julia, thank you especially.
Thank you.
Welcome back, Tony. All right.
Thanks.
Bye, guys.
That's awesome. Bye.
Good night.